Welcome back to another episode of The Job is Easy, The People Are Not, Top 10 Smart Skills to Help People Get Better. Today, we're going to talk about one of the smart skills that I think it's essential for success, managing up. And when I was thinking about who's the best person to speak about managing up, of course, I had to think about you, Dr. Sean O'Ferguson, one of my colleagues here at the Asia School of Business, one of our deans. And I think of Sean as somebody who is truly extraordinary in managing up, not just his colleagues, not just our bosses, but also the students, the entire community. So today, Sean, we're going to talk about managing up. Welcome.
Well, hey, thanks, Loredana. I'm really looking forward to talk about this. Really had to think about what this meant in terms of the way I manage and operate and how it kind of impacts other people in the organization and our broader stakeholder community.
Yeah. So let's start with this very simple question that I try to ask everybody, which is, in your simple words, what's the definition of managing up?
So for me, managing up is really about not just your boss, right?
Yeah.
But the people that you serve in your stakeholder community. In our case here, that's students, that's our recruiters, our corporate partners, faculty, everyone. And there's a little bit of a different twist to each one of those groups that you manage.
Yeah. I have to say, when I thought about the top 10 smart skills that are needed to succeed, based on what I have seen here at ASB, managing up at that point, from what I've been taught, was purely what you said at the beginning, managing your boss. But the more I studied, the more I learned, the more I observed you in action and obviously our community, I learned that managing up, it's a lot more than that. It's not just managing your boss, which of course we have to do, but it requires you to understand your stakeholders, your entire stakeholder community from multiple perspectives. But also made me realize you need a lot of other smart skills to do so, and you do it well. What are some of the other skills that you think are needed for managing somebody well?
Well, I think the first thing is trust and then empathy. And I say that because when you're serving someone, and I think of this as a, kind of a component of servant leadership, right? What you're trying to do is really get at, what do your people, constituents need in order to accomplish the end that they're looking for?
Yeah.
So in a boss context, it's really understanding how you're trying to help enable them and support them to get to whatever goal or end that they have. For the students, right? And we know this, MBA students can be some of the most demanding students. I don't think I've had a more challenging boss than MBA students. And it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me young. Figuring out what do they need in order to fulfill, the expectation that they've had when they've joined a great school like the Asia School of Business. And so really understanding, being empathetic, being able to put yourself in their position. And when they get the sense that you are empathetic and you understand where they're coming from, that creates a level of trust that I think creates this kind of virtuous cycle for, greater kind of impact for both sides, right? So,
well, because, they say that nobody cares until they know how much you care.
Right, exactly.
Right? And I think all the meetings that you and I have together, the one-on-one meetings that we have together, you always start the meeting by saying, how can I help?
Right.
And in most cases, you are the one calling the meeting. And I'm like, wow, that's so kind and generous of you. But what I realize is it's actually a really good managing up strategy, because the second you say that, and I took notes and we were speaking, by sharing with me that you want to understand my needs, I know that I can come to you when I have needs, but I also know that when you come to me for your needs, we're going to have this reciprocity that you mentioned. Were you always this good at managing up? How did you learn? Let's go back to your some of the early jobs that you have. You used to work in corporate America. How did you learn how to manage up?
I don't know. It maybe even go before the jobs, right? Growing up, you go to church, we were, somewhat religious family. We go to church and the collection plate comes around and they talk about the measure you give is the measure that you get back and then some, right?
Beautiful.
And so in hearing that, that always kind of stuck with me in life. So I'm always going to give more than I can give. And then we hope the chromatic forces in the universe kind of take care of everything. And I used to, as a teenager, we're all kind of mouthy to our parents sometime. And my mother, she would, when she would, what someone would probably think of as a teenager as kind of nag, And I would say, Mom, leave me alone, right? And then I'd walk away and run into the wall or something like that. And she would say, you see, God doesn't like ugliness, right? And so whenever I've been fortunate that whenever I didn't have pure intentions or I was only thinking in my interest, I would get those instant reminders. So nothing really big or bad ever happened to me, but enough happened to me to kind of keep me straight and honest. And that's something that I've taken forward. And I think I've just translated it, from home to even when I was in school growing up, I'd always been leaders in organizations because, it always felt like, if not me, then who, right? So I never wanted to be a leader because I wanted to be a leader. I wanted to be a leader because someone needs to do this and something needs to get done. So,
and there was a need there that it was very obvious.
Exactly.
You used to work, I think, for Procter & Gamble back in the days. And I remember us talking a while ago about you were actually a very young manager and you had to manage older people, right? Yeah. And what was that experience like? What made you a successful manager as a young kid, in your 20s, that you had to manage up people who were probably old enough to be your parents, right?
Yeah, that was a great experience. It was so formative for me at that stage in life, and so many things that I learned at Procter & Gamble in that experience, managing people who were old enough to be my boss, definitely at least to be a parent, definitely at least to be a big brother or something along that line, helped create formative lessons for me as a manager. And the people, like I would always listen, right? And I think that's another important thing about
which is another smart skill, right?
Another smart skill. We talked about this, just listening, right? And sometimes it was over lunch, over coffee, and just listening what the team said and what their view of the world was.
Yeah, because most managers go to the assembly line, right? And they ask, what's your KPI? Right. What are you doing? As opposed to, I remember you telling me you would actually ask about the person first.
Exactly. Yeah, one of my favorite examples, and I had this line worker. He worked on the most complicated portion of the line, and I remember I'm like, I need to figure out how the line is going, and a lot of it was just I was afraid to ask him, right?
Of course.
How the line was going. So I just went over there, and his name was Horace, and I said, hey, Horace, how's it going today? How was your weekend and everything? And Horace started telling me about his weekend, right? And we talked for 15 minutes. His son played basketball. I eventually coached his son's basketball team. And so we were able to build rapport because I asked about his weekend, right? And so I felt good. I'm like, all right, yeah, like Horace kind of respects me as a person, right? Yeah. And I went away, right? And then, later that day when I came around to the line, Horace said, hey, Sean, how's it going, man? The line is running great, right? And so he told me something I wanted to know without me having to ask, based on building rapport
and the trust that you mentioned in the beginning, right?
And connecting with him on a human level, right? And I think that little episode there has kind of stuck with me for the rest of, my professional and personal life.
So one of the reasons why this book is called "The Job Is Easy, the People Are Not" is that we think of management almost as a science, as a discipline. I have to say, I said this multiple times, and I think it's embarrassing for me to say this out loud, but the day I learned that companies were made of people, it sort of like changed the way I think about management, because the second you realize, oh, actually, you know what? My boss is a person too, and might have a good or a bad day. And every now and then my boss maybe wants to be validated because nobody validates her. Or, a colleague of mine might appreciate if I make first a positive human comment about how's your week, do you play basketball or whatever that is. But I think we tend to be almost in this, wheel of intensity and overwork, and we glorify, stress. And then we forget every now and then to put in a good word. And then, like you said, building this trust and reciprocity actually pays back a lot more.
Absolutely. I think it's opened many doors for me. And when I reflect on some of the, different episodes in my life, just serving the individuals, I was thinking about an accreditation exercise, right? There was a need in my last role at a prior employer where I had to take on an accreditation for something that we were doing it kind of as a gesture to showcase it. Because we had to. Because you had to, yeah. And I was like, I'm not sure I really want to do this, but at the end of the day, it was the right thing to do. I did it, and we did a fantastic job. The peer review team lauded our report, and then, I think at that time I thought, okay, that was great. It's over. It's done.
No big deal.
No big deal.
Somebody had to do it. Yes. I did it. No big deal.
And fast forward a few years, and now one of those reviewers is our mentor in the accreditation process, right? And I think you sometimes you're creating goodwill, and now we're kind of managing.
You have to manage him up.
Yeah, I have to manage him up as a stakeholder, and but we have history, right? And so there's already that basis for trust, and so I think the relationship has been even more impactful and productive for us as a school because we had that prior history, and so sometimes. Taking on these additional responsibilities in the moment seem like extra work. Then you fast forward 3, 4, 5 years, and you're like, wow, that really paid off, and it was totally worth the investment, right? And so,
yeah, I don't know if it's karma or life or God or something, but so I want to ask you a question. When I teach about managing up, I have sometimes entrepreneurs in the room who say one of the reasons why I wanted to become an entrepreneur is not to have a boss and not to have to manage anybody up. And I have to say, as a former entrepreneur myself, I always have a little bit of a smirk because I'm like, you're going to see that is quite the opposite. As an entrepreneur, you're actually going to have so many bosses. What's your take on entrepreneurship and managing up? Because I know a lot of our students are saying this too.
Yeah, so I think it's the pressure that an entrepreneur probably feels when you get into it is probably unlike any other pressure. I've worked at big institutions, I've worked at small startups, but I've never been the guy at the top of the entrepreneurial pyramid. And there's so many people to answer to. And managing up is really about who are you serving, right? So as an entrepreneur, you're serving investors, they're looking for a return. Everything started because you had this idea or this concept that you wanted to take to the market. So you're trying to convince customers. So you're serving them. And then, you have all this responsibility because this is a risky venture, right? But you've gotten people who have families, kids, et cetera, to come on board and work with you and follow your kind of vision for something. And you have to serve them. And that could be meeting their emotional needs, but it can be even more real as far as making payroll next week so that they can pay the tuition for their kids' school or put food on the table. And so there's really no place where you can get around serving and managing up in any context, right? And so when the students say this to us from a career perspective, I'm like, everyone has a boss. And
an entrepreneur has a lot more than one.
Yeah, a lot more than one. I think it's counterintuitive. The easier role is probably to work in the machine and just go to the corporate entity and just have one boss, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of bosses, you're a boss.
Yeah.
What does it take to manage you up?
Oh man. So I think what I've learned is that you need to create space so that you can be managed up. And what I try to do is just be super transparent, little things. So I'm I'm a technophile, so I'm always using different tools. And the tools are there so that my people can figure out what I'm doing, maybe protect me from myself, right? Or, like on Microsoft Outlook, I let everyone see my calendar. And so whether it's Crystal or Vivian or Emily, they can say, oh, Sean, you're going to this meeting about that. You may want to think about that. And so when I come to a meeting with you or Charlie and the leadership team, and I sound like, wow, that was a great point. On many occasions, that was someone on my team, after we've kind of created this,
trust and reciprocity, right?
Trust and reciprocal relationship have helped prepare me or position me for success. And so I also think it's, by providing access, being vulnerable as well, right? Because I think there's no better way to connect with people than to let them know that you're human, right? And so, there's been times I've cried in front of people. I know, like this big 6'1", 200 and some pound black man from America who's loud and you can hear him outside in the hall. I can be vulnerable with them. And I think that, that's me, trusting the counterparty that hey, I know that you care about me, but in order for you to better, for us to work better together, you have to see the kind of whole Sean. And I try to see the whole other person. I remember another great episode from Procter & Gamble. We were on the line, and when the line goes down, you usually, at this point, we would come to the office. So I think this is when we still have beepers. I got a beep at, 1 a.m, the line's down, and I'm in work, I'm rushing into work. It's a pretty major problem. And it was down until the next morning. So almost over 30 hours, wow. Right? And, my boss at the time, he was awesome. And, he asked me, while we were really
in the trenches,
Sean, are we going to get this thing up? And I snapped, and I was crying on the line in front of a bunch of grown men.
Wow.
And I was like, Matt, and I don't know if we can curse or whatever.
We can beep whatever we need to beep.
But I said, this shit matters to me more than anyone else. And we're going to get this line up. And, I'm 23, 24, so I'm still struggling regulating my emotions. And Matt looked at me, put his hand on my side. He's like, all right, you got it, Sean. And I was like, oh, wow, he trusted me. And then because he gave me that trust, we were already working hard, but my maintenance team and everyone saw that, and it kind of gave us even more strength to get the problem resolved, right? And so these lessons too, managing up, it's you learn from other leaders on how they've managed you, and you're able to take some of those skills and apply them to other settings. So
I was recently in a meeting with my team, and one of my colleagues, who's a subordinate, but not that I care about this thing, she said, just so you know, I'm managing you up right now. And I loved the fact that now that we have words for a lot of the actions that we do in the SMART category, people say, I am managing you up right now, or I am practicing my listening skills, or I am being cognitively ready. And actually, I think that a lot of managing up requires also to be cognitive ready. Because if I'm able to, so we have an upcoming board meeting, the whole organization has to be cognitively ready for whatever the board will want to be, right? And we have to manage up in advance. So for me, once again, I think of managing up not as managing your boss, but managing your constituents. But I have to say, and I want to ask you this question, every time I teach about this or about validation, which is another top 10 SMART skill, people ask me, is managing up kissing up?
No, it's a gross simplification of what managing up is. It's really about connecting, it's building trust. And, if you look at, some of the articles that are out there, kissing up actually erodes trust and, it undermines your ability to be credible with your boss, right? And
you can tell when somebody's kissing up. It smells.
it smells, and it's like, as a boss, when you see people kissing up, then it undermines everything else that person may say to you, right? Whereas you want people, to be able to give you hard feedback or disagree with you about critical decisions. And so it's never really about that kissing up. It's really about the goal at hand, right? And I think if you stay centered and focused on the goal that we're trying to achieve within the nature of this relationship, then I think that's one of the most critical elements of building that trust. But if it's really about making me feel good or that kind of thing, it doesn't really have any staying power long term. It's like a sugar high. It feels good initially.
And then you feel sick.
But if we're not getting the enrollment or the placement, it doesn't really matter. That sugar high wears off really quickly.
I know that you were telling me a few days ago that you have a favorite book that talks a lot about these things, that brings the managing up frameworks into a context of teamwork and collaboration. You want to tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, there's this great book by Francis Fukuyama. It's called Trust. And it focuses on social virtues and how they create shared prosperity, right? And so for me, I think this whole concept is about building a foundation of relationship that creates this kind of virtuous cycle an exchange that leads to greater good between individuals or parties, right? And so I believe, at its core, it's kind of a win-win philosophy, right? If I help Loredana do well, Loredana is going to help me do
Absolutely.
well. And then I'm going to want to help Loredana do better. And then it just keeps going back and forth. And this happens at the micro level in relationships between individuals. This happens at the institutional level, the national level.
It happens in supply chains, right? There's a lot of research that says that, for example, Toyota, and we studied a lot about it in both at MIT and ASB, but Toyota's relationship with its supplier was always about what can I do for you? Because if I do something really good for you, you're going to do something really good for me. I don't think it's mercantile. I think it's really an understanding that your growth is my growth and my growth is yours.
Exactly. And sometimes, we have to, we talk about this with our students in terms of networking and relationship building, and students feel uncomfortable with this because it feels they're thinking about it in this kind of mercantile kind of way, right? But it's, what we've had to tell them is don't think about what can you get from Loredana, right? Change the mindset of how can I help Loredana, right? And
then naturally somebody will help you back.
Exactly.
If they don't, they are not smart, right? And you shouldn't probably hanging out with them anyway.
Exactly. Yes, that's a fantastic point.
So before I ask you the last question, and I want to ask you to help us think a little bit about what kind of advice we can give people to develop their managing up skills. I just want to highlight and maybe help me better understand and communicate how managing up is actually managing your peers as well. Because you don't have to be, so the two of us are in an equal relationship. I think you do an amazing job at managing me up. I think I still need to learn from you how to manage you up better. But I want to bring this point home, that managing up is not managing upwards, your boss, but it's managing up the needs of your stakeholders, including peers, that have to do the work together with you. So this concept of collaboration and team.
Right, yeah, for sure. Because I feel like, if you look at every team, the best teams are complementary parts, right? And so, and sometimes there's this tendency to want to be competitive with peers, right? But, and I think it works with, thinking about it up and down, even with subordinates, that your success is my success, right? And so, like, if you take the two of us, our roles are very complementary. One of the things that I think in terms of like marketing and branding the school, creative-wise, you have something and a creative vision that I don't have. But then I feel like what I bring to the table is this kind of ability to kind of execute it, operationalize it, quantify it, and share back with you like, hey, Loredana, X, Y, or Z is really, really value add. How can we get more of that, right? And then like, if you're successful, right, then I'm successful. And I feel like, in a lot of instances and I think peer is what people struggle with the most, right?
So, absolutely. And that's why I really want to highlight this, because once again, just the same way followership is not, blindly following a rule, managing up is not managing your boss, but it's managing your entire constituents, including your peers, and maybe more than anything, your peers.
Absolutely. And it's the toughest relationship because your subordinates, you can bring them along, right? Because you have a little bit of power and influence over them. Your boss can bring you along, but like winning your peers over.
This has to be because we want to do it.
And I tell this to students all the time, and this is why I'm a big advocate of student leadership, particularly at the MBA level. I say if you can lead in this environment with a bunch of Type A MBAs who you don't have any performance review authority over, any budgetary authority over.
Any formal power roles?
No formal roles of power. Then when you get into a situation where you have these levers and tools, you're going to be an exceptional leader. And you won't even have to use these tools.
I was just about to say, you don't even need them.
You already know how to motivate, connect, and move people. So that's, I think the peer piece of managing up, I think is the most challenging. But then at the end of the day, it can be the most impactful as well, especially relative to like the other relationships you may have in the organization.
And maybe that's going to make the job slightly easier and the people easier too. So my last question for you, and I've been trying to ask every single person that we interviewed, what advice do you have for somebody who tries to develop further their smart skills, especially managing up?
So for me, and we talk about this in some of our, we talk about this in the Google book, right? The orientation to defaulting to yes, right? I think professionally, I've always had this fear of missing out. So I always tend to say, hey, yes, I'm always on board, right?
Yep.
And from that, at the time, especially when it gets a little bit rough, you're thinking, wow, why did I take
Why did I say yes to that?
Why did I say yes? But I think these always represent growth opportunities that you have in your toolkit. And then, you're able to reference and use these in other situations, right? And so, so I would always tell someone, always immerse yourself in whatever you do. It'll create opportunities for you in ways you couldn't foresee. It puts you in situations that test your ability to manage different kind of stakeholders. You think about, like, you're from Romania, I'm from the United States. We're here in Asia doing something in a cultural setting that's outside of our own. I think for me, it's been a transformational developmental opportunity, because now I'm like, if I can do it in Malaysia or I can do it in Hong Kong, I don't feel like there's a setting where I can't make something happen. And my wife, she always jokes that, you're a big egomaniac because you think you can do anything, right? And I'm like, when you've put yourself in so many different situations, you always feel like, you can make a way out or work with people in a way that helps you, kind of get the best out of any situation and group of people.
I don't think you're egomaniac. I don't want to contradict your wife, because you should never contradict your wife. But I love what you said about saying yes as an advice, and I just want to say thank you for saying yes to this project before we even knew what this project is going to be. And I asked Sean, could you be part of this project? I don't know exactly what's going to be, and this is, I think, where the creativity and discipline come into place. And thank you for helping me put it together with the entire team that helped with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a masterclass in managing up by no other than Sean O'Ferguson, my colleague, my friend, if I can say so, here at the Asia School of Business. Thank you for staying with us for another episode of The Job is Easy. The People Are Not. Top 10 Smart Skills to help people become better.